All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode. Now, in this video, I want to talk about the issue of veganism. I have been a vegan for 13 years. I became vegan when I was 18 years old, approximately in very early 2012. And it has been one of the things about me as a person which has really defined my identity for a lot of people. I was very involved in the early kind of vegan activist movement in the UK back in 2015. I had a very popular YouTube channel back then, which is since off the internet. I was involved in the production of vegan content and documentaries online and on streaming platforms. I later then directed Seaspiracy, the Netflix original, which became one of the top 10 movies on Netflix in around 50 countries, promoting a vegan diet and lifestyle as a solution to a lot of the problems facing the ocean, a solution which I still actually believe in for the most part. And for the nuance of that, you're really going to have to check out the article on my Substack. Link will be in the description. I wore vegan activist t-shirts, vegan activist hoodies, went to protests, went to rallies, filmed the slaughter of animals extensively, knew this issue inside and out, networked amongst some of the most well-known vegan content creators online, have seen the rise and fall of various stages of the sort of very contemporary vegan movement, the booms and busts of vegan product launches, the Beyond Meat thing. I remember in the UK when, getting oat milk was an absolute novelty that you couldn't find anywhere. Whenever someone high profile in the vegan movement ditched veganism and became an apostate to veganism, I'd be one of the first online to be, they were never vegan in the first place. Only a real vegan who really gets it is, who's seen the animal suffering, truly gets it. And those people were just plant-based and all that kind of stuff. I fully understand. And it's probably going to be the kind of things that people want to try and attempt to throw at me here. However, you don't get more vegan than me over the last 13 years. I really challenged people to find someone that was more vegan than me during this entire time, which is why I think for many people watching this may be so crazy to even consider. Like I said, I've been a kind of vegan that wasn't just, it wasn't like I was eating honey from time to time. It wasn't like I was eating oysters from time to time. I wasn't using secondhand leather or those kinds of things. I wouldn't wear wool. Well, many vegans that call themselves vegans still do those things, or they'll from time to time have a little bit of meat, or they'll eat something off someone else's plate that they didn't pay for. That's not the kind of veganism I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a kind of veganism that is out of this world vegan. When traveling, looking for a vegan restaurant, if it meant having to walk an extra 10 miles to find a place that did a vegan option, I would do that. And I've done that in probably 12 countries or more over my entire life as a vegan. It's something that was incredibly important to me, was the paramount of my entire moral framework and how I existed in the world. I am someone that has quite large feet, and as a vegan, you need to then find vegan footwear, and it's already hard to find large shoes that are vegan. And so all during the last 13 years, I've been constrained to pretty much like 3 different types of footwear, pretty much 3 or 4, or particular brands. Like it became to that level, the kind of watch straps I would buy, the kind of toiletries that you'd buy, the kind of things that most people don't even think about when it comes to being vegan. I thought about it and lived it for 13 years. I was activist on the streets. I've seen all the documentaries. I've seen all the slaughterhouse footage. Some of the most influential vegan activists that you know of online. I've been friends with them personally, offline as well as offline. Know them or knew them before they got big. Spearheaded the vegan scene in London in the early stages and really helped foster a community of sort of grassroots activists and people that cared about the cause, which then became the support network for businesses that were launching that are still around today. And so this has been a big, big part of my life. And so I just want to get this out of the way in case people don't think I was fully vegan. Believe me, you're wrong. I was probably more vegan than you've ever been. I don't want to be more arrogant, but the point is that I'm just as vegan as you are, if not more vegan than many people watching this who may accuse me of not really getting it during this entire 13-year period. Moving on, the reason why I'm making this video is because I actually think, as someone who lived and breathed veganism and promoted it to many, many people, I think I've been responsible for actually spreading a kind of dangerous lie that I want to rectify in this video and set the record straight for any people I've influenced who have found themselves in a position that they didn't expect themselves to be, failing on the vegan diet or whatever it may be. And in order to set this out, you're going to really have to read the article on my Substack. I can't emphasize that enough because I lay out my argument much better there than I do here. However, to get to the real meat of the topic in today's video, what caused me to reconsider my entire approach to veganism wasn't because of some grand, spectacular moment, this grand revelation that I finally changed my ways. And also, it wasn't because of any health issues. I think I've lost count of the hundreds of videos of YouTubers and influencers that have made videos why I'm no longer vegan. From the names of people that if I mention here, you probably won't even know because they sort of predate maybe some of your experience of the vegan scene. Celebrities that moved in and out of veganism, claiming they had brain fog or couldn't get enough protein or XYZ, only to find that really they were living off of, smoothies and not really getting the nutrition they needed, or weren't eating enough protein, or weren't taking B12 supplements and all that kind of stuff. That's not why I've changed my mind. For me, I began to realize, and I'll explain the moment that triggered this, that veganism doesn't actually hold the monopoly to causing the least harm through dietary choices. And that actually there are many examples of a vegan choice that causes more harm to animals than if you directly consumed the non-vegan counterpart to that product. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, except for the fact that it completely undermines pure veganism, 100% veganism, abolitionist veganism, because essentially what it shows is that in instances on the fringes of the bell curve of what we eat, if you imagine the bell curve like this, and at the center you've got the staples that we all eat that's very cheap and reliable and sustainable and accessible in most places: bread, rice, pasta, beans, vegetables, fruit, peanut butter, oils, those kinds of things. On the fringes, you get specialty items that are replacement products that tend to be less accessible or more expensive, depending on where you live, by the way. And it's those things which I'm about to expose as being potentially more damaging to animals and the environment and so on. And in which case, you're probably best off just eating the regular animal-based counterpart to it for reasons I'm about to explain. Now, what triggered this was about a year ago, a bit more than a year ago, in the lead up to Easter in 2024. And we were going on a camping trip with my kids, my wife and kids, and we're going to this beautiful forest up a mountain and just a beautiful landscape. There's no light pollution, and you can see just millions and millions of stars. And we wanted to bring marshmallows along, of course, for this beautiful family, memorable moment to roast on the fire. But as a vegan, of course, you have to think about this kind of stuff. Now, unlike when I used to live in the UK, where vegan products like marshmallows were a bit more accessible, even though they're a bit more expensive, here in Australia, they just really don't exist almost anywhere. So in order to get vegan marshmallows, me and my family had to drive half an hour into the city to a place we never go to a specialty vegan store to buy vegan marshmallows. And then we obviously had to drive half an hour back, and we had to go over a toll bridge this time. That's $5.60 each way. So it's like, $11 or something total, $12 or something. Each way to the full trip. And so it's about an hour's journey. We're already tired parents doing all this effort to get vegan marshmallows. And the vegan marshmallows that we got were a very small bag that cost about $16 for about less than 300 grams. $16. And on the drive home, I started to realize that actually this was insane. This can't be what ethical living looks like, surely. And so on the way home, I'm doing the maths in my head. I'm thinking $16 plus the $11 or so toll bridge, plus the fuel, wear and tear, all the stuff that goes along with owning and running a vehicle. Our time, not only the hour for my wife, but the hour for me, what we could have otherwise done in that time, and the total amount of money that we spent on this whole round trip to get a packet of marshmallows. And I started to think, well, surely if I would have just hypothetically bought the animal gelatin marshmallows at the local supermarket for, $2.50 without spending all the fuel and toll bridge fees, and all the money I spent, not even if I gave all of it to an animal sanctuary, even if I just gave a couple of dollars that I saved to an animal sanctuary, surely that's going to do more tangible, measurable good. Not least of which because the subsidies that are involved in the animal agriculture system subvert and distort any so-called supply and demand knock-on effect that a vegan lifestyle is meant to cause. And so that was one thing, the supply and demand issue. Lastly, when it comes to things like gelatin, it's really an afterthought of the animal agriculture industry. It's not the thing that the industry hinges on. It's not the thing that it gets most of its profits from. It's not the things justifying the entire industry. It really is a byproduct, as much as vegans like to deny that. It really is a byproduct of the industry. Now, last of all, the amount of gelatin that we're talking about here is so trivial, it's laughable. In order to create 100 grams of marshmallows, you only need 1 gram of gelatin. It goes a long way. And so in a packet that's 300 grams, you're looking at 3 grams of gelatin. In terms of creating a kilo bag of marshmallows, you know how marshmallows are quite light, a kilo bag, you're looking at 10 grams of gelatin. And so I thought all the money that I just spent into doing this, traveling across the city to buy marshmallows that, by the way, were imported from Germany here to Australia, I thought, no. This can't be. Well, this isn't why I became vegan. This is insane. This is huge amounts of wasted money, resources, fuel, time, energy, air freight to transport sugary fluff from the other side of the world. This is insane. Surely I'm better off getting the animal counterpart, the animal-based gelatin. And if I and even without donating some of the savings that I made to an animal sanctuary, even just side by side without giving any of the money I saved to an animal sanctuary, I'm almost certain, in fact, I think I am certain, that animal gelatin-based marshmallows are causing less of an impact than vegan marshmallows, without even having to give money to a charity. And you might be wondering, okay, Ali, we get your point, marshmallows, but they're not really that important in people's diet. Why don't you just leave it? Teach your kids that their taste buds aren't more important than an animal's life, yada, yada, yada. I get all that. And if you're a parent watching this, you'll probably empathize with this situation a lot more than if you're childless and you're watching this as a vegan activist. But essentially what I'm trying to say is, but I'm not even certain that we are helping more animals' lives by sacrificing the temporary taste pleasure of my children in order to hypothetically save these animals somewhere at a certain time, maybe even down in the future at some time. It's not certain that that actually is happening. That supply and demand impact is actually happening here. And I'm certain that it's not actually happening, especially in the case of these marshmallows. And so you could say, oh, okay, fine, be vegan apart from the marshmallows. Okay, that's fine. Well, first of all, a lot of vegans won't be happy with that. In fact, I'm pretty sure the majority of vegan activists won't be happy with that because they take an absolutist position that consuming a product that has animal products in it is therefore kind of justifying the entire system and feeding into this narrative that animals are here to be objectified and used. And so there's no cost that could be great enough to justify the moral harm from using even a smaller piece of animal products. And I just disagree with that entire position. I don't think it's pragmatic or realistic at all. And it doesn't take into account real world circumstances and the most important point here, opportunity cost. Vegans will be familiar with this hypothetical, which is, if you're a vegan and if I could tell you that you could save the lives of 10 animals by eating just an egg, would you do it? Now, for me, the answer is, well yes, actually. I'm of the position that if I can save 10 animals by eating an egg, by having a chocolate bar with some milk in it, by having some marshmallows with some animal gelatin in it, I think that's the better choice to make here. But vegan abolitionist attitudes to this is usually to brush it off as some kind of unrealistic hypothetical that has no bearance in the real world. Well, it turns out that analogy actually hits the nail on the head when it comes to the daily choices that vegans are making and the opportunity costs to their decisions. And I'll give you a few examples other than those marshmallows, okay? So vegan cheese. Now, growing up, I used to eat a lot of dairy, but I used to love eating feta cheese in a household that ate a lot of Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cuisine. Now, vegan feta cheese here in Australia for a block about this big is $9. Now, the equivalent dairy option made from either goat's milk or something is $3. So you're looking at least a 3 times price increase. I think sometimes the vegan block maybe actually you get less of it than the regular kind, but let's just say it's 3 times more expensive. The same might be true for various types of candy bar, chocolate bar. I remember in the UK, before we left, the vegan Kit Kat came out, and the price difference was just insane side by side with the regular Kit Kats that I used to grow up eating, as a kid. And so here you have this issue of price parity. Now, a vegan will often say, well, that's just because these are new items on the market. There's not enough demand for it. Once the demand increases, then the price will eventually go down. Fair enough. That may be true with some of the products that have made it into market that you can look at over the years and say, well, yeah, the price has come down. However, I think that's actually usually the exception to the rule, whereas the rule generally has been that prices haven't necessarily come down. They've either stayed the same or actually have gone up in price. Now, one quick example of this from memory is Oatly barista milk. When that came out, it was awesome. I used to drink it all the time. It was around £1.50 for a litre, which was a little bit more expensive, but it tasted amazing, so whatever. Now, that about 8 years ago, it was £1.50. Today, they sell for around £2.50, maybe even £3 in certain supermarkets. Now, 8 years have gone by. You'd hope that in that time there's now more vegans. More people are aware of the product. A lot of people are dairy intolerant. There's a big demand on it, but the price hasn't gone down, it's gone up. One economic principle for this is that actually increase in demand doesn't always drive down price. Sometimes it can do the very opposite. Now there's more people wanting to get it, just like in the housing market. If there's a huge demand for houses in a particular place, the price of it goes up, especially if the amount being produced stays the same due to limiting factors. And so here you actually have an example where the price has actually gone up. And the same can be true for a lot of other products, Impossible Burgers, Beyond Meat, all kinds of specialty vegan cheeses or vegan candy bars. They've either gone up or maybe stayed the same. It also doesn't help that we've had a lot of inflation since COVID. And so the idea that just wait, hold fast, vegans, eventually you're going to cause the prices to decrease, is built on a huge naive assumption that given enough time, given enough vegan documentaries, given enough social media posts and campaigning about going vegan, that the world or any particular country will eventually become vegan, and then the prices will just be like they are for the animal equivalent. This is not true. I gave a talk at a vegan event in 2023 about why the world is not going vegan. And if you'd like me to talk about that in an upcoming episode, just let me know in the comments or something. And so you can't just claim that eventually the prices are going to become matched. The other thing about dairy in the case of cheese is that there are so many subsidies at play with the dairy industry that the promise that there is a vegan supply and demand chain of events, a sort of domino effect where vegans create more demand, the supply increases and price goes down, is not something that actually works, because we're not in a free market by any means, especially when it comes to dairy. Around the world, particularly in the United States, but also elsewhere, the price of dairy is sort of set by the government. There are government subsidies, incentives for producers to produce a lot of it, and they get paid for the extra that they produce, regardless of whether there's any consumers for it. And so today, they can't get rid of the stuff fast enough. There are farmers that are literally having to pour truckloads of dairy down into the drains just because they got no market for it. And they have to dump it because if it goes into the marketplace and creates a boost in the supply, the cost of dairy will go down and they can't afford that to happen. So they literally just dump it. They're also having to bury cheese in these huge cheese caves across America just to store it. I also think that they've been storing this kind of stuff on like warships off the harbor, or there's some stories like that where they're storing agricultural products that have been created through subsidies offshore in military vessels. I think I'm correct in saying that. And so in the case of that vegan cheese, for example, now I have no desire to eat dairy cheese. The taste kind of makes me gag, but you're probably best off buying the regular feta cheese for $3, and with a couple of the dollars that you just saved, instead of getting the vegan kind, giving a few of the dollars you saved to either an animal charity or a political lobby group that's going to petition the government to end the huge amount of subsidies going to dairy. That's probably the best option you can do compared to getting the vegan dairy, because the vegan dairy, yes, it might benefit you. You may not like the taste of dairy. You may prefer the taste of vegan cheese. But in terms of actually helping animals, in terms of alleviating the pressure on dairy cows, it's doing nothing, I'm afraid to say. I'm so sorry if I'm the person to break the news of this to you, but the subsidies involved in dairy supply are such that there's nothing a vegan has done when it comes to buying non-dairy products that's really made too much of an impact. Now, you could say that the overall non-dairy market of sort of plant-based milks soy milks, oat milks, as a collective has put pressure on the dairy industry in certain places, such as the UK, where there are examples of dairy farms that are now not so profitable, and it's something that they predict will be out of business at one day. But a lot of that demand isn't from the vegan market, which is maybe 1 to 3, maybe 5% of the nation if you're lucky. 5% is very, very high. I think Israel might be the highest percentage in the world of vegans. But I think really when it comes down to it, it's the majority of regular flexitarians, meat eaters who are choosing the non-dairy option. So I just want to make that clear. Now, this is in direct opposition also, when it comes to the price of vegan foods, to what many vegan activists will say in the streets. I've seen countless street interviews now from very well-known vegan activists who, speak to a mother who's pushing a pram. She might be carrying a baby in one hand, one toddler's running around, she's got a baby in the pram. And she's said, I'd love to go vegan. I reduce wherever I can, but I just can't do it because I find it too difficult, it's too expensive. And she will inevitably be given this slogan from the vegan activist that's been rehearsed 100 times, which is rice and beans. Rice and beans are really, really cheap. Don't you know that all the poorest people in the world eat rice and beans? Why don't you just eat rice and beans? And for me, this is not only patronizing and unrealistic, but it's borderline insulting. Not least of which because almost every instance I can think of a kind of career vegan activist that I know of does not live on rice and beans. If you take all the vegans in the world, you're probably looking at 0.00001% of the vegans who are choosing to live this kind of whole foods, no oil kind of approach that you're like literally living off rice and beans, and who knows how good their health is long term. And so it's very hypocritical for those vegan activists to make such claims to a struggling mother, especially as most of these activists don't have kids themselves and view it as a sign of grave sin to have kids in the world. And so those vegan activists are often the very same people on social media ranting and raving about how great this new vegan alternative is that's come out on the market. The new Impossible Burger, the new Beyond Burger, this new thing at McDonald's, this new thing at Burger King, this new thing at Subway. Have you seen this new Kit Kat bar from Nestle? Have you seen this new Cadbury's chocolate bar from Cadbury's? A lot of the time, every single one of these products I just mentioned are way more expensive than the animal-based alternative. And so for me, my entire position on veganism has really changed, mostly really on the periphery of this bell curve. So if you like to imagine a bell curve again, where in the center you've got all the main sort of plant-based foods that people eat, that is affordable, accessible, ethical, and sustainable. Affordable as long as you're not going for the expensive, fancy organic stuff, where you've got your vegetables, your fruits, your beans, your nuts, your seeds, your legumes, your the wheat, your pastas, your rices, peanut butter, oils, the kind of main bulk of plant-based ingredients. And then on the bell curve, on the fringes of that bell curve, you have things like the marshmallows and the vegan feta cheese and the Kit Kat bars and you got the vegan footwear that's like $300 for some simple shoes because they're ethical. Made from like mushroom fibers or something ridiculous, or vegan toiletries, or you name it. There's any number of products, and there are thousands upon thousands that are niche, that are vegan, and they're very expensive, usually very inaccessible. And actually, some of that fringe of the bell curve creeps into the middle a lot of the time, depending on where you live in the world, where dairy cheese in the UK may be cheap, but in Australia it's very, very expensive and kind of falls into that fringe area yet again. But nevertheless, is usually a big part of people's regular diets before they become vegan. Now, my attitude is now such that I actually don't think that opting for the vegan option on the fringes of that bell curve are necessarily doing any good for animals because of the opportunity cost that you've just lost to make a better impact elsewhere, whether that be donating some of the money you saved from buying the vegan marshmallows and actually giving some of that money to an animal shelter or a political party to end subsidies. That's an opportunity cost that you just missed because you wanted to get the $16 bag of marshmallows like I did. Or instead of buying those, $300-$400 epic, like sustainable sneakers that you've found on this new company, instead of buying that and instead of just opting for some secondhand shoes, secondhand leather shoes, mass-produced shoes or whatever. I don't know what you want to make the alternative here, but you're probably best off making that option. And with the hundreds of dollars you've now saved, giving that money to an animal sanctuary. And that is going to have a more tangible impact on animals. A lot of the time, vegan products are really only just vegan in name. They don't necessarily contain any animal products in them, but the impact is either neutral, like it's doing nothing for animals, or it's actually causing potential harm to animals when you consider the opportunity cost you've lost by opting for that. And so one of the big messages really, and the big point of this whole video is not everything that says it's vegan does anything good for animals. It's just that it's vegan in name only. Now, while I'm at it, I just want to make a quick comment on donating to animal sanctuaries. I've actually found that vegans are the most reluctant to donate to animal charities a lot of the time because they believe that they're doing enough. They believe that they're doing enough to save the animals by buying that $20 Beyond Burger or Impossible Burger, by buying those expensive vegan trainers, sneakers, or boots, by buying the $500 sustainable winter jacket. They believe that by abstaining from buying animal products, that they're somehow doing a positive for the animals. But really, it's just it's either a net zero, where you're actually, okay, well, you're not hurting animals, but you're not really doing anything to protect them. And so what I've found is that there's this immense amount of pride that vegans have in themselves that I also had myself as a vegan for 13 years. I really haven't donated very much money to animal charities at all. I think through my work on Seaspiracy, I think I was able to raise millions of pounds or dollars for all kinds of ocean causes and animal charities. But me, myself, I felt that, well, I'm vegan. I'm absolutely doing more than anyone else. I don't need to donate to any other animal charities. And the reason that has to do with all kinds of, other factors. How dare that animal sanctuary feed that rescue cat fish? Don't you know about the fish? Or how dare you, sterilize that stray dog? What about the rights of that dog? And all that kind of stuff. And it goes on and on and on and on. And by the end of the day, the vegan has justified not supporting any sort of animal causes or any animal charities. And they don't have to lift a finger. They don't have to do anything. They get to just sit on the couch and eat a Beyond Burger and feel like they're saving the world. And they have all this unearned moral superiority. And so I actually think that there are a lot of vegan sort of animal sanctuaries out there that are really struggling and are probably very, very frustrated with the vegan demographic because of this very issue. And my answer to this is actually, first, I think if vegans were to stop buying those really fringe, expensive vegan products and instead get secondhand alternatives or buy the cheaper animal-based option like the Maltesers or the Kit Kats or the marshmallows, and the money that they saved, if they were to give that to an animal sanctuary, I think that's going to do a lot more good. Now, moving on to a few other big problems with veganism. And I encourage you to check out the Substack article linked in the description of this video, because it's really where I lay out even more arguments against veganism than I do right here. But one of the other issues here is this topic of backyard eggs. Now, vegans kind of put backyard eggs and honey in a bit of a gray area where it's not as visually striking as showing cows or pigs being slaughtered in a slaughterhouse, which is very graphic, and it's kind of something that's there's a visceral reaction to that people kind of get quite emotional about, and therefore make those decisions based on some of that stuff. But when it comes to backyard eggs, it's really quite hard to argue against it. And the best argument that a vegan can really conjure up is this idea that when you take a chicken and you put it in your back garden and you take eggs from it, you're objectifying that animal, you're commodifying that animal has a right to its own life, that every life is sacred, every life is equal, and you're just taking it like some kind of breakfast snack laying slave in your garden. And also that because of the way chickens have been hybridized over the last sort of 50, 100 years, that the native, not native, but the original form of the chicken only produced maybe one egg a week or one egg every 2 weeks. And now we've bred them to produce one egg every day. It's very taxing on the system of that animal. And we shouldn't be taking those eggs for ourselves. We should be feeding the eggs back to the chickens. Now, if you're not vegan and you've never heard that a chicken eats its own eggs, it's something that is possible. Animal sanctuaries run by vegans, what they usually do is they take those eggs and they just smash them on the ground, and all the chickens come over and start pecking at it and having a little bit of it. However, there's only so much egg that you can feed back to a chicken. Chickens don't always want to eat the eggs as well. Sometimes they're not interested in that. And so the idea that you can kind of disappear the problem by giving that kind of rebuttal isn't good enough in my book. The questions around objectification, around that kind of animal, it's a very, very weak argument as well, because there are tons of other examples where we have mutual relationships where it's not exploitative. And I think rescuing a chicken from a life in a factory farm or elsewhere and giving it safety of your garden, where it can roll around, dust bathe, eat any of the critters on the ground, eat some of your food waste and have a good life, and you just take an egg from it that they're not going to be interested anyway. I mean, come on, that seems like one of the best lives that a chicken can live in the life of all chickens ever. And so it kind of falls apart very, very quickly. Now, here's the thing though, and this is really the crux of the backyard egg issue. The idea that eating a backyard egg is unethical and immoral, and that somewhere between that chicken laying it and you grabbing it, something deeply wrong has just occurred, really, really breaks down when you compare it to the alternative. So what is the alternative to an egg for a vegan? The answer is tofu. Almost every vegan loves to eat scrambled tofu. I love eating scrambled tofu. Bit of turmeric, bit of black salt for that eggy flavor. It's awesome, okay? Let's take a side-by-side look of tofu and a backyard egg. Now, tofu requires a field, and a field requires for the trees to be destroyed or cut down and disposed of. So you've got a field. You now need the equipment used to till the field, and yes, insects might get killed in the process. Small mammals might get killed, sure. That happens in a lot of different forms of agriculture. Once you harvest the beans, you need to take it to a factory for processing. That factory also needs to be built using a lot of resources, a lot of machinery. Workers need to work in that factory. Those workers are not vegan. The wages that a vegan is helping to pay for by the demand for the tofu is going to pay for a worker who's eventually going to buy animals to eat anyway. So there's that as well. The tofu isn't usually produced in your own country, or those beans at least, so they need to be shipped around the world. Once the tofu is produced, it needs to be packed in plastic. It needs to be refrigerated in the place that it's being produced, on the vehicle that's being transported on, in the shop that's holding it, and then at home. So you've got also refrigeration, you've got electricity, you've got transport, and you've got land impact, and so on. Side by side with an egg from a chicken that was rescued in your garden, eating bugs on the ground, or eating scraps of food that you left behind, producing an egg, which one's more ethical? Are you telling me that the tofu block is more ethical compared to the backyard egg? Really? This is where the argument really becomes quite clear and obvious for me, that a backyard egg is far more ethically superior, if you want to use that language, to a block of tofu. Now, I still eat tofu. I love tofu. I don't think I'm going to ever stop eating tofu. But compared to an egg, I'm sorry, but the backyard egg is more superior to this. In fact, I can list out probably another 1,000 items that vegans eat every day that are less ethical than that backyard egg. A packet of crisps or chips, snack bars, non-dairy milk, bread, you name it. Basically, every single food a vegan eats compared to that backyard egg is just going to fall short in terms of its impact, its environmental or animal ethic impact. And so for me, this is another one of those places where this concession, this example, debunks the entire moral framework of 100% absolute abolitionist veganism, because you therefore ought to be eating more eggs if you want to help protect animals elsewhere or have a lower impact elsewhere. And by the way, I'm not talking all eggs in from any chicken. Commercially raised, factory farmed chickens is one of the most horrific processes that I've seen. Day old chicks that are male are ground up alive, and it's a whole thing. And you'll probably know about that by now if you're still watching this video. But in terms of a backyard egg, for me at least, a backyard egg is way more ethical than pretty much anything else a vegan eats or does in their daily life. And that's just a fact. And so after all of this, the marshmallows, the vegan cheese, the vegan candy bar, the backyard eggs, and so on, as I could really go on to for hours in this video, really started to break down for me the vegan promise that through a vegan diet holds the monopoly on necessarily causing the least harm to animals, really started to break down. And I started to realize that actually this 100% vegan approach doesn't deliver on its promises. And there are countless examples that after 5, 10, 12 of these examples, you really start to go, okay, this isn't just some trivial thing now. This isn't just, oh, well, just, don't eat the tofu. Okay, well, don't have the marshmallows. Don't have the candy bar. Don't have the cheese. Don't have this. After a while, you start to go, actually, this is amounting to quite a lot of products, and the logic starts to fill a pattern, and you start to realize that actually, this is a lot more common than we've thought, and that there are a lot more examples to this that you could probably think of now. And so this is really based on the opportunity cost as well. And I really began to understand or question this idea that in order to live a good and moral life, it required reading food packaging labels. And this is where it really got down to the heart of it for me, where I started to realize the idea that we are morally superior people because of the food we eat not directly containing animal products just started to sound really trivial. It started to sound really, really quite silly in many areas. And just bear in mind, I'm not saying you should go to the other extreme, but I'm just saying this idea of abolitionist, 100% pure veganism really started to break down. And it reminded me, if I may, I know what will be a very secular audience, give an example of a parable that Christ gives in the New Testament, which is this idea of when a Pharisee and a tax collector both went into the temple to pray, and the Pharisee walks in and he goes to God, thank you, God, for, I'm so thankful that I'm not like that other man over there. I'm so just, I'm so awesome. I give tithes of everything I own, and I'm not an adulterer. I'm not this. I fast twice a week. I'm this and that. Whereas the tax collector doesn't even raise his eyes, and he beats his chest and he just says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And the parable goes that the tax collector goes back to his home justified, whereas the Pharisee goes back home condemned because of his prayers were tainted with his pride and his arrogance. And I started to realize that for myself, I'll speak for myself here, I know which one of those two people I was more like. And it wasn't the tax collector. Me and all my vegan clothing, with following the vegan rules 100% for the last 13 years, judging and condemning other people for not being vegan and claiming myself to be more morally superior, started to kind of gross me out, actually. And I started to realize, actually, here I was claiming to be a much more moral and good person than so many other people. And I'll just list a few of them here. There are people in the world who just can't do well on a vegan diet. And there are countless autoimmune diseases and issues and ailments that people have that really limits the amounts of or types of food that they can eat. And there'll be exceptions to these, okay? So there'll be vegans with these diseases or ailments that push on through, that pay really close attention to what they eat, and it's a lot of work, they'll admit that to you, and take their medication. But nevertheless, overall, there are hundreds of millions of people in the world that just can't easily be vegan. It's a real, real big challenge. These are people with autoimmune diseases, Hashimoto's disease, celiac. There's, I think, type 1 for some people can be a challenge as well, diabetes. There are hundreds of millions of people that just can't thrive, that can't do well on a vegan diet. That's one thing. There are billions of people in the world that just don't have access to plant-based foods year-round because they live in the Arctic, because they live in arid regions, because they don't get reliable rainfall, because they've had a bad season with crops. And we are literally talking about billions of people that can't reliably access plant-based food. Am I really saying that I'm superior to billions of people on the planet? Lord help me. There's also billions of people in the world that just can't afford access to vegan food, and they don't necessarily always live in the poorer countries, because that's obvious, but also in just wealthy countries. As I've just outlined, the vegan products are often very expensive, and it's just not tenable for people to eat vegan 100% of the time, all the time. And so we have people's health issues limiting their ability to be vegan, people's geography, meaning it's limiting people's ability to be vegan, and people's wallets and income limiting people's ability to be vegan. And the whole just eat rice and beans really doesn't cut it. Don't you know the poorest people in the world eat vegan? Yes, but guess what? Some of those poorest people in the world also suffer from blindness because of the micronutrient famines that they're going through. There are literally, I think, millions of people in the world who are affected by eyesight diseases or blindness because they don't have access to certain nutrients. And one of the cheapest and fastest ways to remedy and prevent childhood blindness is to give those villages some chickens so they can eat their eggs and get the nutrients that they're not getting from their plant-based diet of, cornmeal and sweet potato, So this whole idea that just eat like the peasants do, eventually it doesn't work out. And also, every long-term vegan I know doesn't live on rice and beans. They go out to dinner a lot. They eat out a lot. They go to takeaway restaurants. They get specialty vegan products. And they pay more for them as well. Maybe not always with some products, but on average, they're paying more for certain vegan products than regular other people do. And so I think overall, this really summarizes my position, or at least gives a taste of my position. If you are someone that enjoys reading articles, please do check out my article on Substack. But for me, if I may interject again, another quote from Christ to what I know will be an audience that isn't necessarily into religion or theology. But I nevertheless think that there's a lot of value to be found in this quote from Christ. Christ said something along the lines of this. It's not that which enters a man's mouth which defiles him, but rather that which leaves a man's mouth which defiles him. And I think this really speaks to this attitude that I've had for many years and this moral superiority I've had for a long time. Even if it's not outwardly, internally, I still sort of viewed myself that way. And I think reducing a person's goodness down to what they eat is just something that I can't stand by anymore. Finally, you may be left with the question, okay, Ali, but what are you eating now that you're supposedly not vegan? Well, I say that I can't call myself vegan with a capital V. A lot of that has to do with my belief system changing around all of this. That's the biggest change for me. My pragmatic approach, especially to the items on the fringes of that bell curve. But really, my diet hasn't changed very much at all. I think the only thing I'm regularly eating now, which is not vegan, is these oat and honey bars, which are like these breakfast granola bars. I don't know what they're called, Nature's Valley or something, which I've started eating and I'm happy to eat them. They're really nice. And the reason why we started buying them as a family is because my son goes to a kindergarten, and this year they've had a child that has a severe peanut allergy. And in order to avoid cross-contamination with my son's packed lunchbox, all the kids have been asked not to bring in items containing peanuts or peanut butter. And so we went to the supermarket to try and find a vegan, like date bar, kind of Cliff Bar type option that didn't have any nuts in it. And there were literally nothing there. I think there might have been some options that were extremely expensive. And it was either buying the extremely expensive option or asking my very pregnant wife of now 2, nearly 3 kids to hand make date bars every week when she doesn't have enough time or energy to do that, or just buy the product that was next to it that was actually, I think, a bit cheaper, and has a bit of honey in it. I thought, well, let's just get the one with honey in it, especially now my attitude to all this has changed, and I eat those. I don't currently eat any backyard eggs. Some friends of ours have backyard chickens, and I have access to them. I could see myself eating some of those at some point. I haven't bought the regular marshmallows yet, but next time we go camping, I'm going to probably buy the regular marshmallows. What else? I got no desire to eat, like fish or anything like that. But I will say that I think farm-raised oysters are actually really, really good for the environment, for the body of water that they're in, because they filter a lot of water, and they often contain very high amounts of trace minerals that are really healthy for vegans to eat because the rest of their diet's quite low in it. Things like iodine and B12 and selenium, those kinds of things. The downside is that there are potentially some contaminants in those oysters if not prepared properly or whatever, because they're filtering out so much of the stuff in the water, kinds of bacteria, cyanobacteria. And some people have gotten sick through eating raw oysters, but I think it's quite rare overall. What else? I got no desire to eat, like a full-on, steak or a lamb or anything like that. But my attitude to this has really changed, and this is very recent. It's taken me about a year to come to where I'm at now. The seed was planted with those marshmallows about a year ago. And I don't know where I might be in a year or two from now. And I'm really depending on, I guess, some of you people watching to give me some of your best arguments back to me. Leave your comments down below if you think I'm wrong, if you think I've gotten anything that, if there's any perspectives that you think I've missed that you think I should hear, let me know, because I am genuinely interested. This has been my life for 13 years, and I want to hear it. And so I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I've kind of avoided having any backyard eggs. Not because I think it's unethical or anything like that. It's just, I guess, more of a sort of mental thing. It's been so long since I've had an egg that it's a bit of a weird thing to now consider eating. And I guess I wanted to wait a little bit longer, put this video out, put an article out, see what the response is. If there's really nothing there, then why not have some of those backyard eggs? From time to time, watch your cholesterol and whatever. Apart from that, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I'm now consuming. I was at a gathering actually, and there was some cake and there was nothing else. And I was like, okay, it's probably not vegan, but it might be vegan. I haven't paid for any of this. It's kind of like being a bit of a freegan. And I picked it up and ate it. And I was like, whoa, okay, there's a lot of dairy here. There's a lot of butter icing and there's a lot of milk in this. Clearly, it just smelled like it was just a very visceral smell. And I had to just put it back into the napkin. I had to spit it out because I don't like the taste of dairy. And so I had to spit it out. So I've got no desire to consume dairy or things like that. Actually, here's another thing. So seeing as I've got, a young son, and seeing as he is invited to birthday parties, and seeing as they're not vegan, there's very often the case that he gets a party bag, or it's a kid's birthday at school and that he's been given some sweets or some cake. And we've been raising our kids vegan. And now it's like, you know what, son, like if you want a piece of that cake at school, you go for it, man. You go for it. And like, we just don't even talk about it now. It's just like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So we're very, very flexitarian when it comes to that kind of stuff. I myself, I believe, have had, I think it was either like a gummy sweet, some kind of like, it would have had animal gelatin, and I had that, and I was like, yep, it's fine, whatever. I'm just trying to think when that was and how much I ate, but I really can't remember. It would have probably been like one sweet. And I'm just trying to think what else there was. No, I think that's pretty much it. And also now, if someone offers me, let's say a piece of bread where there's not any like animal products on it that I can see, but if it's probably got eggs or milk in it, I'm fine just to eat it now. I just think just fussing over this is just ridiculous and very antisocial at the end of the day, and ultimately it becomes quite judgmental on other people as well, that giving you something nice, and it becomes a bit of an odd thing to do. And so I guess some of my ick factor to consuming animal products, this idea that, I don't want any death to be in my body, all that kind of stuff. I don't subscribe to that anymore. And so, I still wear, vegan leather boots that are like, 3 years old now, that are still, doing really strong. I'm really a big fan of these vegan boots that I've had for a couple of years now, Blundstones boots. I still believe in the vegan message, at least when it comes to, shifting people's diets to a predominantly plant-based diet when it comes to protecting the ocean, and the message in Seaspiracy, that's clear. Apart from, I think there are some sustainable options now when it comes to like farm-raised oysters. If you really pushed me hard, I think, I'd concede to, if you're someone that has a canoe and you have a fishing rod and you go to a place where it isn't frequented by a lot of recreational fishermen or industrial fishing or a lot of tourism, and you're just someone who goes out there and catches, just your average sort of common fish, and you eat that for, a meal, I think the impact that you're having on the ocean is so negligible and so tiny that it's just, there's no real big sort of environmental concerns for any of that kind of stuff. And so if you'd push me, I'd probably say, yeah, there are forms of recreational fishing that can be sustainable. I think where it goes wrong is where you get these certain touristic destinations, particularly here in Australia, in Western Australia, where because of so many people going out there to do spearfishing, that it actually has made a big impact on those animals, and in terms of sustainability. But yeah, I think I've given enough of my thoughts now. There are so many other issues that I raise in my article on Substack. And so if you haven't already, please go visit my Substack, subscribe to me there. and stay tuned for the next video. Comment below, comment on Substack, give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next episode.